I've been on horror Twitter for about 2 years now, and one of the movies I think has really managed to kind of slip underneath the radar is Dead End. I think I saw it maybe mentioned twice, and once it was on a poll that I only voted for. So I really thought this would be a fun movie to cover right now because it's technically a Christmas movie. It does take place on Christmas Eve, and that's good enough for me. Two Christmas movies, and one of them, of course, is this one. It's a little bit more of a serious take. The other one is a lot less serious, and that might be a hint towards what it is, but it's intentionally not serious. Dead End was released in 2003, and it really is a fascinating little movie. The directors are Jean-Baptiste Andrea and Fabrice Canepa. Those names are very French, but don't worry, this movie is in English. For the most part, this movie does a good job at following American culture, but I will say that the setting, the road itself, does feel like something you would see more in Europe than the United States. Hopefully while editing, I remembered the exact little image I want to have. If I don't, I'm sorry. The only two actors I'll mention play the parents. Ray Wise is famous for Twin Peaks, RoboCop, and Swamp Thing, and of course Lynn Shay, the icon herself, is known for the Insidious franchise, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Critters. Trigger warning for mentions of attempted suicide, dead babies, and car accidents. The movie starts with the Harrington family traveling on Christmas Eve to the maternal grandmother's house. The father is Frank, the mother is Laura, the oldest daughter is Marion, her boyfriend is Brad, and the youngest is Richard. The movie is really to the point when it talks about the strain that comes with traveling on a holiday like this. Like, when you're traveling with, like, 4 other people in a 5-seat car, there's going to be a lot of tension there, and these relationships are already kind of, before the movie even starts, a little tense, and with the events of this movie, it's only going to get a lot more intense, which, great. I mean, it's a good thing to have in your movie, like interpersonal conflict. We have all traveled with our family, and it sucked. Everything goes south when Frank falls asleep at the wheel. The family almost get into a car accident that probably would have killed everyone. This is a huge hint towards how this movie is going to end, but we'll talk about that later, like so much later. Thankfully for now, they all seem to be fine except for being in a little bit of shock. This is when we get to meet the family. No one else in the car seemed to have noticed the fact that they were not on the interstate. If you've ever driven interstate versus back road, there's a huge difference. And number one difference is the fact that they're on a two-lane back road. And I don't know how they missed that, but Frank, without notifying anyone, of course, because he is the father, he kind of made this decision without telling anyone that he's just gonna go and take this back road. And the reason that he took this back road, and he even admits it, is because he was having a hard time staying awake while on the interstate. So he decided to take the back road, hoping that something interesting would be there and he'd be able to stay awake, which never works in the history of man, does taking a back road while trying to stay awake. It is, trust me. Laura's a pretty average mother. She is trying to keep morale up. She's not exactly pleased that Frank hadn't told her, but she doesn't want to create an issue. She's really just trying to keep the peace, keep spirits up. The peace thing doesn't really work because she continues to, like, let the awful child be awful. The awful child is Richard, and I say this because for some reason he has like a real bone to pick with Brad. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but he is just awful, like very homophobic. It's really uncomfortable at times. I feel like he's supposed to be the comic relief, but because this movie came out in 2003, comic relief for that time period was homophobic. So he's awful. Marion is the eldest sister. She's really having a rough time. We find out a little bit later that she is trying to think of a way to leave her boyfriend Brad. And it seems as though, at least at some point in the past, Brad has made a threat to kill himself. And Marion is hoping that he does not do that when she breaks up with him. Much later, we find out that she is also pregnant. Brad is completely unaware that Marion is pregnant, and he is also completely unaware that she is going to break up with him because he believes that he's going to propose to her and they're gonna get married. I honestly don't have that much to say about Brad because he's not really in this movie that much because he's the first one that dies. The family end up coming across a woman that is carrying a baby by the side of the road. They stop, obviously concerned about her, and Richard makes this shitty comment about how she smells, because he's awful, and thinks it's a good idea to make a comment like that. The car is packed, so in order to make room for the woman, Marion offered to walk to a cabin that they had passed a while ago. The car arrives at a cabin, the parents go off to look for a way to contact emergency services. Because this woman has been in an accident, obviously something has happened, and she hasn't been able to really say a word. Richard makes an excuse to go into the woods, saying that he needs to pee, but it's really so that he can go masturbate, because that's something that the movie needed. Brad waits in the car because he's a decent enough person. That's when he finds out that the baby the woman is carrying is super dead. No, you don't understand. This baby is dead. Marion, who is still walking, then sees Brad slamming his hands against the rear window of a car that reminds me of a hearse. It is because the longer part is in the front of the car, which that is not an ideal place to put a body that you are trying to transport. But the car is creepy, and because of the twist at the end of the movie, I thought it was a hearse when I was younger. Point is, it's a creepy car, and Marion is immediately running to her family to tell them that Brad has been taken. The woman is nowhere to be found, and when the family does find Brad, it's a pile of him. That's really the best way I can describe what we see of the corpse. They try to use the phone that Brad had on him, but all you hear is the woman crying on the other end. At some point after this, Frank asks what time it is, and they realize that the car clock and the wristwatch have actually stopped at 7:30. This was at the time that they had nearly gotten to the car accident, so they do assume that things must have gotten bumped around during the accident. I will give credit to Richard for his belief that this is an alien abduction. These are a time weirdness is a common part of those stories, but that isn't really what's going on. It's just a Richard moment, which I can't wait till we stop having those. An example of this is when the family comes across a baby carriage in the middle of the road, and instead of just being like, oh, there's nothing here, Richard does this whole thing where he pretends as though he's being, dragged into it, and it's really not the time because Brad's dead, his sister's having a mental breakdown, and they're still stuck on the road. All the men in this movie are frustrating, because Frank is trying so desperately to rationalize what is happening. And I know that's how some people deal with things, but it's just not helpful. He keeps saying things like, of course there's no one on the road, it's Christmas Eve. Obviously this isn't true. The road is going on, and there are a lot of ideas as to why that might be. There's no, off-ramps, nothing like that. There's nothing, other than, that one cabin. One of these ideas is thinking that it might be a back road for military vehicles, which I was surprised to find out is actually a thing in the United States. To try and cut the tension, Laura tries the radio, which just results in the baby screaming. It's very unsettling, and they turn it off, never going to give it another thought. At this point, Marion, who is not mentally with everyone, randomly announces that she is pregnant. Not really the time for that, and neither one of her parents are thrilled by this information. Richard, in the only funny moment in his little repertoire of this movie, loudly announces that he smokes weed. Probably trying to take the pressure off of his sister. It's a good thing he's going out on a high note. He immediately after this, he goes into the woods to get high and ends up making out with a woman, and now he's in the back of the hearse car. I'm just gonna keep calling it the hearse car because honestly I can't think of a better name for it. This time, when they come across the Richard pile, Laura snaps. She makes the claim that Richard was never Frank's child, and that she had an affair with a name named Alan. I mean, it was obvious that Laura favored Richard and treated him like a baby despite... Okay, so I think he's supposed to be in his late teens, but he looks in his mid-20s, so I'm gonna go with that. This part of the movie is really based around Laura's meltdown, and this just goes to show how much I love Lin Shaye and how much she just steals the show. She's the only performance that I totally believed and really creeped me out. She immediately gets sick from eating an entire pie and potato chips. She shoots Frank after mocking as though she was going to kill herself with a gun that she had gotten her brother. At some point, when they get her in the back of the car, she makes claims that she can see people waving in the forest, including a friend that passed away many, many years ago. This is all a hint of what is really going on. Laura ends up jumping out of a moving car. Frank, dealing with his own grief, starts shooting at the hearse car when it starts to drive by. The hearse slowly backs up and Laura walks out. So this is actually the scene that I remember the most. When I first watched it, I was like, this is real weird, this is real gross. When Laura jumped out of the car, her skull broke and detached. I'm trying to find like the nicest way to say these things because it's actually rather gruesome, even though it's not like explicit. And I think like that's a part of a lot of like torture porn that really gets missed out is just like you're watching it, but like the horror of what other people are seeing is not really like. I hope this makes sense. So I'm trying to figure out what's the friendliest way to explain what happens, but Laura reaches back and starts rubbing her exposed brain. She has what seems like an intense moment, then says that she made the cheerleading squad and this is the happiest moment of her life. Then she dies. It's probably the most gruesome, disturbing part of the movie, so enjoy that. It's been a rough night for Frank, and he's been doing a lot of driving. He's not actually getting anywhere. His son just died, and to his credit, he continues to say that Richard was firmly his son, which I thought showed the kind of person that Frank is normally. His wife died after saying a whole bunch of painful things, but he still loves these people. For some reason, they do feel the need to clarify that Frank did know the person that Laura claimed she had an affair with, one that admitted to Frank that he was having an affair with someone's wife. The wife ended up picking her husband, and the relationship between Frank and Ellen ended after that, although Frank never knew why. But now he does. By the way, we never get an explanation of Frank cheating on Laura. It's apparently only important to clarify Laura's infidelity. So because it's just Marion and Frank at this point, they make the decision to stop the car. Eventually it's going to run out of gas, and they want to be able to have some control of the situation. So they decide to walk into the woods, which I don't think is a bad idea, and I probably would have done a long time ago. And they're kind of walking into the woods, and they come across this fence. And usually when there is a fence, there is something man-made nearby, or at least something where humans go to. So they follow the fence, and it's going on for a while, and when they finally reach the end of the fence, it is the opposite side of the car, which is just impossible. It's impossible. They kind of have to get real. And Frank starts to lose it a little bit, because he does not have an explanation for what is happening anymore. He does not have any other ideas. This is just a terrible experience for everyone. I will say that the interactions between Marion and Frank are very, very good. Like, it feels like a father-daughter relationship. And I think if Laura's favorite child was Richard, then without a doubt Frank's favorite child is Marion. Which is what makes this change so much worse for this part of the movie. They come across from the cabin from before, Frank goes inside, and the light that he's using to navigate is blown out by the woman. He's freaking out, screaming at Marion, and even hits her hard enough to knock her unconscious. He's not doing well as he chases the woman down into the woods with the gun, where he gets killed off screen. We just hear some noises, and it's kind of obvious. Now, Marion knows that Frank is dead. There's not much that she can do about it. She sees the hearse car, and she just kind of starts driving until she runs out of gas. When she gets out of the car, she walks a little while, and that's when the Frank pile actually drips down on her, I guess. Like, everything else had been on the ground. Frank, for some reason, dripped down on her. Anyway, and she's just really kind of begging to the world for this to be over with. I think that Marion was in a coma, and obviously nothing that happened in this movie happened in real life, but I also don't think it happened in, like, this limbo. It sounded as though everyone else in the car died immediately. They might have died in order that they died in their coma, but there was no, like, wondering if they were gonna pass. Brad was someone that Marion was planning on breaking up with. Worst possible situation was having to have that conversation after someone tried to propose to you, while you're pregnant with his child. I think a lot of these issues that arise in these interpersonal relationships are fears that Marion had about each person. I am aware that this doesn't really work with Richard because he's just terrible. I don't think that she had any concerns about him because, well, he's consistent, and nothing he does really affects her. What does affect her is the complicated relationship that she had with her mother. She must have known that she wasn't the favorite child to her. She had to have felt as though there was a different connection between her and her mother than her relationship with her father. I think that she imagined her mother saying horrible, hateful things to her father was just compacted fears about their relationship, that they weren't faithful to each other, that Richard wasn't her full brother, and that they secretly hated each other. I think this also really speaks as to how Marion views her mother, which is a lot more like Richard than her mother is in the real world. Because prior to this, she's not like Richard at all, but once he dies, she's very much like him. This is just according to my theory. When it comes to Marion and Frank, I think it's most clear when it's just the two of them that she does realize that her father isn't a perfect person. He did get them into the situation, but he's not a bad person, even if the last thing he did was punch her in the face. And maybe that's a fear of her father getting violent with her. I have not thought this out as much as I personally think this interpretation amuses me, so that's really the only thing that's important. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Amanda, and this has been Horror Historian. I hope you have a great holiday season. Mine's been pretty good so far. It's, I love snow. I live in the Northeast, so I better love snow. The next two movies are completely picked out. I'm not going to spoil the next one I'm doing, which is another holiday movie. A little less serious, a little bit more fun, I think. I enjoyed both of these movies, and actually the movie I will be doing after that, called The Ballad of Narayama, is actually a movie I really, really enjoy. So, we're having a string of movies that I like. I came back to this channel doing a movie I really hated it, and so far I've done just movies that I like, and I know that's probably not going to last forever, but I'm going to do it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.